minimalist running shoes are created equal in that some minimalist running shoes have more cushioning than others. Take, for example, the Altra Escalantes versus the Tate Evos. Both are zero drop, wide in the front, and are flexible, but the Escalantes have a lot more underfoot cushioning than the Tate Evos. To that point, if you prefer to run in a more cushier running shoe, then this is really where adding barefoot running to your training has never mattered more, because the thicker the sole of a shoe, the more the ground feel or underfoot sensory input is inhibited. And in this condition, developments in foot and ankle functional strength can really only go so far if you are always locking your feet in shoes with a thicker sole, because it turns out that sustainments in having strong intrinsic and strong extrinsic muscles in the foot ankle complex, especially the plantar flexor muscles, which I'll talk more about in just a moment, these muscles require regular exposure to heightened underfoot sensory input. And being barefoot in general, whether you are running, walking, or doing weight-bearing activities barefoot, has been consistently found to elicit the strongest responses in accelerating development in functional strength of the plantar flexors, which is made up of the big toe, which provides leverage to the foot when the foot pushes off the ground into the next step, and also contributes to balance stability. The flexor digitorum longus, which flexes the toes and provides support to the arch, and the flexor digitorum brevis, which is in charge of flexing the front of the foot. So basically, the plantar flexors control the movement of the front of the foot and have a very dominant foot stabilizing role when running, which is why it's imperative to keep the plantar flexors strong, especially if you are doing a lot of running in a cushier running shoe where ground feel or underfoot sensory input is sharply limited. And the reason I mention ground feel is because research, which is linked down below the video in the description box, research by Dr. Stephen Robbins, an MD at McGill University, who has published a lot of groundbreaking work on how barefoot activity can improve motor function, as well as improve or even reverse irregularities in foot structure and function, discovered that barefoot activity led to the biggest increases in underfoot sensory input, which directly triggered reinnervation, which means restoration in nerve supply in certain muscle fibers in the plantar flexors, which in turn resulted in improved functional strength of the plantar flexors. So essentially, the plantar flexors quickly strengthen based on the strong sensory effects of being barefoot on account of the multiple sensory inputs acting on the underfoot when barefoot powerfully triggers nerve networks to grow stronger and more abundantly. But also these nerve improvements and therefore improvements in functional strength in the plantar flexors can really only happen this optimally if you're barefoot. That said, when it comes to strengthening the feet, barefoot may be always better because it elicits the strongest responses in improved nerve supply and nerve connections, which is why to make the most of strengthening the plantar flexors, use barefoot running as often as you can, as well as try to be barefoot as often as you can when doing weight-bearing activities, because conversely, the thicker the sole of a shoe, the more you step down in sensory input voltage, and doing everything all the time in addition to running in such footwear may provide little benefit for producing the innervation that is required to sustain strong muscles deep within the foot ankle complex. So I just wanted to point out that a big part of strengthening certain muscles in the foot ankle complex requires increased underfoot sensory input, because it takes improvements in nerve supply or innervation to help make those muscles stronger, and the nerve supply really only grows out of the sensory richness that barefoot provides. So it would naturally follow that these functional strength gains would definitely be a significant contribute to helping you run more safely with better stable landing control when running in running shoes. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to hit the thumbs up button as well as the subscribe button if you haven't already, where you will stay up to date on forefoot strike running versus heel strike running. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Have fun up there on the roads and trails. Bye for now.